Hey everyone, this is a review of DeWalt's DWS780 sliding compound miter saw. This is pretty much their flagship 12-inch miter saw that has all the bells and whistles. So I'm going to cover the features this thing has, what I love about the saw, and what I really don't like about it. Now as far as miter capability goes, you've got up to 60 degrees on the right and 50 degrees on the left. The miter detent plate is stainless steel. It is adjustable. Mine came adjusted correctly from the factory. And you've got detents at 60 degrees, 45, 31.6 for crown molding, 22.5, 15, 0, and then 15, 22.5, 31.6, and 45 degrees, and then you max out just at 50, hitting a hard stop. Now, if you're moving this back and forth and you don't want any detents, and you don't want to have to push down this button to override the detent stops, what you can do is you can push down the button and flip this lever up, and now it doesn't stop on any of the detents. You can still lock it down with this lever, and I recommend locking it down with this lever anyway when you do hit a detent. That just gives it a little bit more security as well. All right, if you're going to bevel the saw, you have to move the fences out. There's a thumb screw on the back. Just lets you slide this way out and lock it in place. You can stop anywhere along that length. And then you can see there's this tri-wing retainer here, the screw. You loosen that, and then you can bevel. Same thing goes for the other side. You just loosen it, pull the fence out, and lock it back into place. Now, once you have this loosened all the way back here, which I don't love that it's in the back, I prefer a front bevel control. But anyway, once this is loosened, you can bevel left all the way to 45 degrees. And if your fence gets in the way of your motor, you can lift this all the way out and bevel it down as far as it goes. Now you'll notice when I bring this back up, it does not bevel to the right. And this is a double bevel miter saw. So what you have to do is pull this little piece out and turn it, and then you can bevel all the way to the right. Now you'll notice right here we've got the adjustable stop for 45 degrees and this little lever right here. If you want to go slightly past 45 degrees, you can pull this up, move that out of the way, and move it back down. And now you've got a little bit more cut area that you can do if you have to do slightly past 45. You'll also notice on both sides of here, you've got crown stops for 22.5 and 33.86. Just move those into place, and this adjustable screw right here will come down and contact them and stop the bevel. Another point of adjustability back here, if the rails are too loose or too tight, you can adjust that with this set screw and this knob right here. Now another thing you have to look out for when you get a new miter saw is check the fence for squareness, and mine is perfectly square. This is from the factory. Both sides, got no gaps here. Excellent accuracy on these fences. You can see they've got milled faces. It's a very, very accurately manufactured saw. Same goes for the table flatness. I can take a level. There are no gaps all the way across this thing. Even when we're moving out, looking around like this, the whole thing is flat, dead flat. Really impressed with the accuracy of this saw. All right, now one of the issues you can have with a sliding compound miter saw like this is the rails can be out of plane or skew with the table here, and you can get inaccuracies when you slide the saw back and forth. So we're going to take a look at that with this dial indicator. We got it at 0. We're going to move it through its range of motion forward and back. We got about 15 thousandths. That's less than a 64th of an inch. And even when we move up and down, we're really not seeing much more than that at all. That is an amazing level of accuracy from this saw. Less than a 64th of an inch play when you move the saw back and forth. That's amazing. I've had this saw for a few years now, and when I moved into my house here in Missouri, I had a whole basement for a basement workshop, and this thing was amazing. I got this and started cutting with it, doing projects with it. I've cut 8/4 walnut, maple, red oak, all sorts of hardwoods. Amazing accuracy out of this saw, plenty of power out of the saw, and for a long time it wasn't an issue. I had no real complaints about it. Yes, like all miter saws, it spews dust everywhere, but I could live with that. The thing that I really can't live with now is I finished the rest of my basement and I've pretty much got like a quarter of what I used to have for workshop area, and now this saw takes up too much space. And just to give you an idea of exactly how much space this takes up, here it is sideways on my workbench, and you can see the very front of it here is lined up with this end, and then with the dust bag on here, and this is a wire here so that doesn't collapse any, we've got 52 inches from front to back of space that you need for this miter saw. That's ridiculous. That's too much. And if you've got a construction site and you can spread out, that's fine. When you've got a workshop, this is not the saw for a compact workshop where you don't have much space. Now, if you want to mitigate that somewhat, you could put a 90-degree connector on this at the back here instead of having the dust bag. And so that is going to get you right around 42 inches. Up here on the top, you've got your LED cutline power switch. You can turn it on and off. It's got a boot to keep dust out. And then you've got your trigger here that has a safety. You go ahead and move this to the side and then depress the trigger and it turns on. This does not have a soft start. It has a very powerful motor and you will get a little bit of a kick upwards when you turn on the blade. It's pretty easy to get used to it. Just know that it's going to happen. Then you've also got a grab handle for picking it up here on the top, but I much prefer to use the side handles on either side when I'm lifting it. Now, one of the best features of this saw that I will not own a miter saw without this feature afterwards is the LED shadow cut line. Not only does it light up your workpiece, you can see exactly where the blade is going to cut down to, you can see the plate of the blade as well as the teeth of the blade. So we'll go ahead and do a shallow cut and you can see that this thing falls exactly where it's marking. You can see right there, there's the shadow cut line, there's the teeth, exactly where it said it was going to cut. With that shadow cut line, there is no adjusting it like you have to do with a laser. A laser can get out of square as well as left to right. It can be a pain to adjust, but with this, there's none of that. It's just where the shadow is hitting is exactly where you're gonna cut. I absolutely love this feature about the saw and will not own another miter saw without that feature. Now, there are a couple nice features on this saw as far as the blade motion. First of all, with this blade guard, you've got rollers on the front of it to keep it from snagging on something and keep it from getting caught up. Then if you want to lock everything down for transport, you can push this pin in and it keeps everything locked in place. If you want to transport it, you can fold this forward and lock it onto here, and then the whole thing will not move whenever you've got this in place. I use this if I'm going to pick up the saw. Best way that I've found to pick up the saw is to lock everything down and then miter it over to 60 degrees. It's out of the way. You can get it close to your body and pick it up like this. It's really not too bad when you're holding it that way. Your max cut capacity is going to vary with this saw. DeWalt lists it as something like 13.75 inches for a 3-inch thick board. And then for a 4.4-inch thick board, around 9 inches, I think. So in practicality, you're usually not cutting lumber that big. When I did my baseboard in my basement, I used 5.25-inch baseboard. I was able to cut all of that upright against the fence, which makes it a lot easier just mitering back and forth instead of having to bevel. Now, for the 45-degree angle cuts on that, I did have to cheat the front of this out a little bit and use the sliding rails to give me enough clearance between the saw body and the top of that 5.25-inch base, but it was able to do all of it without having to lay any of that base flat. For adjustments on this saw, you've just got one tool. It is stored on board back here. It's got a Torx end here and a hex end here. For doing blade changes, you've got your spindle lock right here. I've got the saw unplugged, and you can see it pops in right here, and then the blade won't turn while you are loosening it. And you also have an adjustable clamp that goes on either side. You just rotate it 180 to pull it out. It's got a little D cut on it right here, and then you rotate it back in. It slides up and down freely right here, and then you can adjust it with the screw here. Now, as far as dust collection goes with this thing, it is one of the worst miter saws I've had as far as dust collection. You've got all the way from up here, back here to the bag. This long tube is, I mean, you got to have something that gets it back there, I guess, that slides back and forth with the carriage here, but it's just a long distance and it doesn't get much of the dust in this bag. It does at least have a little chute right here that is flexible and goes around the fence whenever you're cutting, so that helps, but not a great deal. Another feature this saw has is the ability to do trench cuts or non-through cuts. You can go ahead and flip this stop down. You've got an adjustable screw right here that controls your depth. And there you are, it stops, and there's not very much flex up and down. There's a little bit, but not nearly as much as some other miter saws that I've used that have a feature similar to this. This thing is so sturdy compared to sheet metal brackets that I've seen in other cases. As a testament to the accuracy you can achieve with this saw, last year I did every bit of trim carpentry on our basement finish project, and I cut every little bit with this saw. Afterwards, I hired a professional painter to go over everything, and when he was done with the job, he remarked on how tight the trim carpentry was and how little he had to caulk. And that was without him knowing that I, the homeowner, had done all of that trim carpentry. Now, I'm sure I took 3 to 5 times as long as an actual trim carpenter, and if that was my professional job, I would probably starve to death, but it is a testament with a little bit of attention to detail and using this saw, the results that you can achieve. So there you have it, the DWS780 miter saw, an amazingly accurate and well-featured saw. It just takes up a ton of space and spews dust everywhere.